All right, there we go. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening for those of you on the East Coast. Hope you're having an amazing Thursday. Thank you for your patience and getting started. So, all right, let's do this. So, welcome to today's apartment investing training. So, let me ask you something. Are you ready to stop wishing for your first apartment building? And are you ready to stop watching everyone else build assets and get passive cash flow? Well, good. Then you're in the right place. If you don't have one yet, please go grab a notebook and a pen and let's get to work. This is not going to be the type of training that we just breeze over topics high level. There is going to be a lot we're going to go through. So let's get prepared. All right, I had to move my face off the screen so I don't keep looking at myself. All right, let's do it. All right, so what to expect. So here's the good news. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to get started in apartment investing. I'm going to break the process down to 4 easy to understand steps so that you can get clarity and start working on getting your first apartment deal. All right, let's do it. All right, so before we get too deep into the content, I want to tell you exactly who this class is for so that you know that you're in the right place. So if you're tired of living paycheck to paycheck, this class is for you. If you're worried about having enough money in retirement, well, let's start fixing that today. If you're sick of exchanging your time for money, then I'm glad that you're here. If you're tired of spinning your wheels and trying to figure out, like, where do I even start with all of this, then you're in the right place. And of course, if you're tired of or afraid of making mistakes that are going to cost you money, then this is the place to be. So, but this really goes a lot deeper. It's deeper than just the things I mentioned. Like, deep down, you know that if you can't figure this out, then you're missing out. You're missing out on appreciation and increasing rents that are just happening naturally over time. Someone actually reached out to me last night over Messenger, and I thought her name was familiar. And she mentioned that she knew me back from, she said, EWI days. And that company's not been around for a very long time. I used to teach there years and years ago. And she's like, yeah, I still want to get started. And that was 14 years ago. So, like, just imagine all of the appreciation and rents that she would have had the opportunity to have if she had gotten started. So, she didn't get started, but now she can. And that's great. I want that for you guys as well. What else are you missing out on if you fail to get started? You're missing out on the freedom that passive income provides. And you're possibly dealing with the stress of being able to provide for your family, or the ultimate nightmare of not having enough money to retire. Like, that's terrifying. You're going to be stuck questioning, like, what about Social Security? Is it going to be there? Is it going to be there when I'm ready to start collecting my benefits? And then worrying about heading into retirement with liabilities versus assets. So, we don't want any of that for you. So what we want to do is I want to show you what our approach is to apartment investing. And that's exactly why we're here today, so that you can avoid all the confusion on where to begin and what comes next, so that you can get started in apartment investing as quickly and effortlessly as possible. So I'm not going to pretend that it's not going to require a lot of work to get up and running. Of course it is. It's a new business. But we're going to do our best to shortcut your path to success so that you can just get going. So what I'm going to walk you through today is our 4-step approach to apartment investing, which includes, this is how we categorize it: select, investigate, close, and manage. All right, so before I jump too far into that, I just want to share with you, like, why I even know all this random stuff. Like, because let's just be real, there's a lot of crap out there, and a lot of people claiming to have the miracle pill, when, like, that's total BS. There is no miracle pill. It takes knowledge and the willingness to put that knowledge to work. So my background is in accounting. So I am a CPA, but I realized really early on, like, I do not like trading my time for money. And what I like even less, and Jennifer laughs about this all the time, teases me, is I do not like to be told where I have to be and when. Like, I'm more of a free spirit. Let me spread my wings. I will rock it, but please do not ask me to be somewhere at 8 o'clock in the morning at a specific place. And so it feels so constricting. So, for me, my journey started in 2003. So since 2003, I've been investing, and I've done, I feel like, pretty much every strategy from fix and flip to buy and hold to lease options, pre-construction. I've done conversions and square footage additions and add-ons, apartment buildings, and pretty much everything in between. And so I've gained a lot of knowledge through the years. A lot of it, unfortunately, I ended up learning through the School of Hard Knocks. And it's not the most enjoyable way to learn, but you learn, you grow. And I just was passionate early on about making sure that other people on this journey could have an easier time than I did. So backing up a little bit, in 2004, so about a year into my investing journey, I ended up starting a property management company in Detroit. So it's funny because I look back now, and it was such a painful time, so much learning involved. But at the time, so a lot of my clients were from California, and they were new investors from California. And they would look at the prices there and just be like googly eyed about just how cheap things were. So they would come and buy these 20 to 50 unit apartment buildings, and they were just an absolute disaster. So they'd be like, okay, Stacey, I bought a building. Here you go. Here's 30 units. Manage it. And, and I had built my employees and my team and everything, but I was like, what? What is this? Like, did you do any due diligence? And they did not know what they were doing. So they just had this disaster of a building. And just out of absolute necessity, very quickly, I had to learn how to take over an underperforming apartment building and do a management turnaround on it. So now we call those, now fast forward to today, we call those value add projects. And we're going to talk more about that in today's class. But I had the opportunity through all of that, and then through consulting and through my own investing, to run multiple 6 and 7 figure turnaround projects from start all the way to the finish. So I learned a lot during those processes. So anyway, there's so many Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck. And I think the most recent statistic that we saw was like 76%. That's most of America. And I look back now on my decision to get started 17 years ago, and I'm obviously grateful that I made that leap. But like, I remember it was scary at the time. Like, it was downright terrifying to me because I really like stability and I like certainty. And that's the last thing you get when you're starting something new, right? I think I lost 30 pounds in the first 6 months because I couldn't eat. I was really scared, and it was a really challenging time. I didn't have the right kind of training, made a big investment, didn't get good training at all, and just had to figure out a lot for myself. But the reality is, going through that, like, it was incredibly rewarding, because now when the first of the month comes, I'm not wondering, is my employer going to have the ability to pay me? Like, especially right now, based on what's going on. Like, so now, because I have multiple rents coming in every month, it's not dependent on one person or one company. And that's a very empowered place to be. I have 4 kids. I have 3 8-year-olds and a 6-year-old. So I have 4 small children. As a mom, as just a woman, as a human being, financial security it's really important to me. So, anyone can take away your job, but what they can't take away from you, from me, from anyone, is your knowledge. Like, once you have the knowledge, that can never be taken away. The other thing that can't be taken away is my ability to pass that knowledge down to my kids, and so that I can create a legacy. So anyway, there's a lot at stake, not only for the money you have coming in, just for your own freedom to not rely on an outside party to take care of you, and just, so that you have options. But anyway, let's get into the 4 steps. So now's the time, get out your notebook and let's get into it. So remember, the 4 steps were select, investigate, close, and manage. And I'm going to delve into each of those 4 steps. Now, for the select step, I'm going to break that down into phase 1 and phase 2. Okay, so we're starting with select phase 1. And select phase 1 is going to include 2 pieces. The first is selecting your investing strategy. All right, so your investing strategy is talking about, there's really 2 main ones we're going to talk about: either stabilized and performing, or value add. So stabilized performing cash flow is the one that people are usually the most familiar with. I mean, even if they know nothing about investing, they've heard of that. And it's like high occupancy is typical. The rents are coming in every month. The expenses are under control. Like, that's a really great strategy for just stepping into immediate cash flow, right? You put your down payment, in, you close the deal, and you have cash flow right away. Okay, that's a stabilized performing cash flow strategy. The other, high level topic strategy is the value add project. So let me educate you about that one a little bit more, because there's more to it. So a value add project could really be created because a number of things. One would be low occupancy. So occupancy can be either physical occupancy or economic occupancy. And the difference is that physical occupancy is how many of the units are occupied. There's people in them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people are paying rent. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. So economic occupancy is how well the building is performing on an economic basis, economic rents. So for example, let's say we have a 20-unit building and there are 20 units that are occupied. So we have 100% physical occupancy. But let's just say that 40% of those tenants are not paying any rent. All right, so that means it has a 60% economic occupancy. Okay, so you see what the difference is? And it's not that that's super typical to see, but you will see it. I mean, there's Robin, if any of you caught the interview with Robin the other day, we were talking about his first 26-unit building that he brought on. He brought me on as a consultant to come in and help him build management systems and do the turnaround. And that's exactly what he had, is he had a building that had pretty high physical occupancy, but very low economic occupancy, because it was a bank foreclosure. The bank was doing a terrible job managing it, and so money wasn't coming in. So the value add opportunity is to increase or improve the economic occupancy in that particular case. So some other things that could create a value add opportunity is under market rents. All right, so when you're buying a property and let's say that the owner hasn't been increasing rents every year after year after year, it could be that you have a tenant that's been in there for 10 years and is paying market rents from 10 years ago or 6 years ago. So you have the opportunity to raise the rents to market rents. That's another opportunity for value add. Another one is if it needs renovation. And when you renovate, you're typically renovating in order to bring the value of the rents up to market value. Another opportunity could be because the management is just doing a bad job. And that could come from a number of places. It could just be the bad property manager, but more realistically, what we see is it's self-managed by the owner who's sick or tired or getting divorced or having stress or just frankly not good at management, and they've managed the property right into the ground. Those are amazing opportunities for value add. Another thing could be expenses could just be completely out of control, and no one's taken the time to look and say, can we decrease these expenses? And so here's the thing that all of it leads to. The opportunity in a value add project is to take the current NOI, which stands for net operating income, which in the business world is like the same as the net profit. So it's to take the current net operating income and raise it through a variety of things, either raising the income, which could be raising the rents, filling the units, renovating, and then renting out for a higher amount, or reducing expenses, or combination of all of those things. But at the end of the day, the whole point is that the net income of the building is higher than it was when you bought it. That's where a value add opportunity is. And the bigger that gap is between where it is now and what it can be, the more opportunity there is for you to make money. And here's the thing, net operating income has a direct impact on the value of the property. That's why it's called a value add. So if you have a property that you're going to raise the net operating income up, when you buy it, the value of the property is much lower. When you finish doing the turnaround and the net operating income is higher, you've drastically increased the value of the property. It has, to make it super simplistic, let's say it has like a 10-time factor. So for every dollar you increase the NOI, the value of the property increases 10 times. Now, it depends on market cap rates and other things that are a little more complicated, but just so that you understand the concept, that's a huge value. So it's a normal transaction and a value add play to create six-figure, sometimes multiple six-figure increases in the value of the property, right? So it's not a quick thing. It's not like you're making money today. It's a 12 to 24 month, sometimes 36-month play that you do, but for big dollars. All right, so that's the investing strategy part. This is just, it's so critical that you know going into it what your strategy is going to be. We'll dive into that a little bit more in a second. The other part about phase one is selecting your financing strategy. So what I'm talking about here is, I'm not talking about where it says self-funded. I'm not talking about you buying the building with your own money 100%. I'm making the assumption that no matter what, you're using bank financing. Okay, so that bank financing is part of it. But the bank is only going to finance, let's say 75% of the purchase. So what about the other 25%? And what about the closing costs? And what about the financing costs? What about the appraisal and the inspection and your impounds, right? The deposits that your lender's going to want to have you make, right? So you have all these other funds that need to be brought to the table at the closing. So if you're self-funding, it just means that you're the one bringing the money to the table, right? Now, the next one is small group joint venture. And this is probably where we see the majority of people land. So small group joint venture is when you bring together a handful of people. It might be 2 people, it might be 5 people, but it's a small group of people and everyone has a role in it. And some of the role might be that some people bring money and have a little bit of responsibility. Other people don't bring money, but they're doing all the work. So, but it's a small group and everyone decides on how are we gonna work together to bring this across the table, right? So joint venture, small group, that's the most common way of financing the gap funds. Syndication, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's such a buzz term right now, and I want you to understand like what it means and where it's relevant. So syndication is relevant when you're doing bigger projects that require a much bigger raise, and raise is referring to the amount of funds you need to raise to do the deal. So syndication is where you're bringing in potentially a lot of investors. They're all passive. They don't have any say in what's going on in the management of the building. They just put their money in. So when you're syndicating, there's a lot of different rules that you have to follow to be compliant with the Securities Exchange Commission. So that's not something we see a lot of people who are brand new stepping right into as their first one. So we don't spend a lot of time educating about it, but I wanted to at least bring it up because you will hear the word. And sometimes when you're new, you're like, well, where does that even fit in? You're probably not going to be syndicating on your first one. And there's a lot of extra expense when it comes to syndicating. So a lot of lawyers and agreements and everything like that. So we're really, probably realistically, you're focusing on either self-funding if you have the funds or doing a small group joint venture, okay, for your finance strategy. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about, why is this part even important? So why is identifying and establishing your strategy so critical when you're getting started? So in order to create a clear path to achieving your investing goals, you have to be crystal clear on what your investing strategy is and whether you're going to be financing the deal yourself or raising funds, because it impacts literally every single part of your journey. Your realtor conversations, your property choices, your team selection, your analysis, like how are you going to analyze the deal, your bank financing, your gap financing. And if you are bringing in investors, what kind of investors are you looking to attract to your deal? So you have to know going into it, are you a stabilized purchase, buy and hold investor, or for this project, or is your project going to be a value add? All right, because defining that is going to drive the entire rest of the deal. All right, so like what happens if you just blow right past this part? Like you have a strategy, you just jump into it. Okay, which by the way, was totally me. That was totally me in 2003. I was like, wait, let me just do every kind of deal, which is why I know so much random stuff, but there was no strategy. It was just complete chaos. But if you're stepping right now and you're on this class, you're ready to get into apartments, what happens if you just skip that step? Here's what's going to happen. For one, you're going to spin your wheels like crazy. You're going to look at every possible deal, having no direction, wasting a lot of time, probably getting frustrated and possibly just giving up, right? So you've got to identify your strategy. Like what else can happen if you miss this step? You really increase the risk of doing the wrong kind of analysis because you don't have clarity. And that can cause you to make a bad investment and not end up making money, or the ultimate nightmare, lose money. So that's not what we're looking to do at all. And what are the benefits of like nailing it and getting it right? So you're gonna have confidence in knowing exactly what you're looking for. You have the ability to convey with precision to your realtor or broker what types of opportunities you're looking for. What kind of lenders and or investors that you need. You have clarity on what type of analysis to conduct in order to make the right offer for your exit strategy. Everything is just focused and efficient and streamlined. So you can just cut out all of the clutter of spinning your wheels and actually start investing. All right, so that's just, at every step along the way, when we finish kind of like a whole section, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of self-evaluation. All right, because everybody who is here and participating is coming in from a different background, a different set of knowledge, maybe education, maybe experience. And as we go through, I want you to do a self-evaluation, and I want you to rate your understanding of this concept, this specific concept of choosing your strategy and choosing your financing strategy. And I want you to open up your chat. So if you don't have it open up your chat, and I want you to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, I 100% understand this, I get it, I know what my strategy is, this is not a place where I feel like I need any kind of like extra understanding. So both for strategy and financing. Scale of 1 to 10, I'm already an expert, I'm good. 1 meaning I have no idea what you're even talking about and how did I end up on this webinar. Okay, so rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and where you feel like you're at. The reason we're going to do this is because I want you to really have a good understanding when we're done with this of where you're good, where you're like, I don't really need help in this part. I got that down and I got what you said and I get it. And then there's going to be other parts that we go through that you're going to be like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Well, damn, I'm glad you brought it up. I really need to understand that part better. Okay, so at each step we're going to go through and you're going to self-evaluate where you're at, drop it in the chat, and then make a note, of course, like, wow, I need to learn more about this part. All right, and that way we don't want to just come here and just blurt out a bunch of information and have you, hey, learn a bunch of stuff. We want this to be actionable, and where you know, when you know where you're strong and where you're not strong, it helps to give you guidance as to what you need to focus on next and where you need to bolster your understanding. All right. Let's give everyone another moment. Give everyone in the chat. Looks like there's 14 chats. Not that I'm seeing all the details at the moment, but looks like most people got them in there. All right. So if your number's not in there, get it in there. Okay. And then we're good? Okay. We're gonna move on to phase 2. Okay. So phase 2, hydrate. All right. All right, so in phase 2, we're going to be talking about selecting a market, selecting your team, and selecting properties. All right, so for market, what we're talking about is you want to make sure that the market makes sense for you to be holding a property long term, right? Because even if your strategy is to do a value-add project that you sell in a couple of years, the market still has to be strong for the next buyer. Otherwise, there's not going to be buyers if the market's not strong. So there's a couple of different things that we focus on. One is population and population growth, and the other is job growth. So what exactly are we looking for? When it comes to population, you're not going to be well served to be investing in small towns. And here's why. You don't have a big population base for filling your units. So ideally, you're working in cities or markets that have at least 100,000 people. Obviously, the more the merrier. There's at least 200,000. That makes me feel better. But you want to see that there's a good, solid base of people who are going to be potential renters for you. All right. The other thing that we want to see with population is that we are dealing with a positive population growth, or at a minimum, that the population is at least holding steady. The thing you don't want is you do not want to start investing in a market that has a declining population. Because what happens when you go 10 and 20 years out and the population is steadily declining? You're going to start having, issues with occupancy. All right, the other thing we're looking at is job growth. We want to see that there's a positive trend in the job growth. So that would be either decreasing unemployment, or increasing job growth. That would be the same thing, right? So you want to make sure that you're not in an area where population is declining and, well, gosh darn it, the unemployment is raising. Like, that neither of those things are going to be good. So you want to make sure your market makes sense based on where it's going. All right. The other thing that we're looking at is you want to make sure that the market is a cash flow market. So at the most basic level, this is so high level, but it's still relevant. You want to make sure that the market at least makes sense for the 1% rule. And I know a lot of you probably know the 1% rule, but I'm going to cover it for just a minute, just in case you don't. So Jennifer and I, we live in San Diego, California. So if I wanted to buy a rental property here, I'm probably going to spend, and I'm talking single family home, I'm probably going to spend $600,000, right? That's just how much stuff is. So I'm going to buy a house for $600,000 and I'm going to be able to rent it for $3,000. All right, that doesn't meet the 1% rule. What would meet the 1% rule is if I could get $6,000 a month rent for my $600,000 purchase. That's the 1% rule. So there's a lot of markets, especially in California, where the 1% rule is never going to be met. Like the rents are just not that high. The property values have gone a lot higher. So those are markets that do not make sense for investing in apartments if your goal is for long-term cash flow. So the markets that tend to make more sense for this in general are more like in the middle of the country, not always, but in the middle of the country, more like Midwest. You'll see a lot more areas where the 1% rule really applies. For example, let's say that I'm buying a duplex. I'm using the smaller ones just because the numbers are a little bit easier, but let's say I'm buying a duplex for $150,000 and the rents are $750 and $750. That means my monthly rents are $1,500 and the purchase price is $150,000. That meets the 1% rule. Okay, so that's just what you're looking for. It's just a way to quickly go, ooh, this market has great population and great job growth and everything else, but wow, it doesn't meet the 1% rule. So you can move on quickly and look for markets that make sense financially. All right, so that's the selecting a market. The selecting a team, you're looking at your brokers and property managers are kind of like your primary, your first line of defense as far as a team. Brokers are first because the brokers are going to be the one that you build relationships with to create deal flow. Your property managers are going to be critical for putting in place once you are performing or once you're taking over the value add. Your property managers absolutely one of the most important key players. All right, so brokers and property managers are your first line as far as your team. Your next group of team members are your lenders, your inspectors, and your contractors, which all of that usually comes into play once you're under contract in due diligence. And then once you're out of due diligence and heading towards the closing, you're building your team of insurance agents and then of course your title company. All right, so selecting your team is going to be critical because you can't do all these things. You're not an expert at it. You're not licensed in it. Your ability to successfully conduct a transaction is based on your ability to sit in the CEO chair and drive all of these different things and make sure they're happening and know who you need to call for what. So you have to have a team in place. So selecting your team that's why it's so early, in phase 2, select phase 2. The third is selecting your properties. All right. So what we're talking about here is initiating deal flow. And what I mean by that, so deal flow can be made in a number of different ways. There's a lot of ways people do it. Sometimes they're, calling sellers directly or sending them letters. There's a lot of things you can do that are both time consuming and expensive. The thing that we have found that gets you where you want to go the fastest with the least amount of effort, not no effort, but the least amount of effort is building relationships with realtors and brokers in that local market, particularly ones who focus on apartment investing, multifamily investing, and working with investors. So this is a situation where you're not looking to go have one broker, one relationship in a market because they only have access to whatever listings they have or whatever's on the MLS or whatever deal they happen to hear about. So when you have 4 or 5 different brokers in a market and they're all looking out for deals for you based on your strategy from phase 1, now you're increasing the flow of deals that you can come in and run your numbers on and potentially make offers on to get a deal. All right, so selecting your properties or having brokers bringing you deal flow is going to be really important. All right, so now let's talk about selecting your market. Okay, that was the first thing under select phase 2. So of course you can establish the same framework. Why is it important? What if you miss it? What are the benefits getting it right? To your team and the deal flow. But I want to focus right now on selecting your market. So why does it matter? So selecting your market is going to be critical for being able to move forward. But of course, if you choose the wrong market, you're going to find very quickly that all of the analysis in the world is not going to produce any kind of numbers that make sense if your goal is cash flow, right? That'd be like me choosing San Diego and I'm like, I keep reviewing deal and deal and deal and man, all I find is negative cash flow. Well, because I didn't start off by finding the right market, right? So choosing the right market is going to help you find deals that work financially and are solid for presentation to your lenders and to your investors. So like, what if you just skip market analysis and Or what if you choose the wrong market because you didn't do market analysis? So if you choose the wrong market, you risk losing money long term. So what I mean by that is, like, what if the population is declining? And what if unemployment is increasing? And you don't know that because you didn't do market analysis and make an informed decision. Your vacancy is going to end up going up over the long term, which is going to reduce your net operating income. And remember, net operating income and value go hand in hand. So if your NOI is going down because you have more vacancy, the value of your property drops, right? So it's super critical that you're working in the markets that make sense and that you've done the research. And the benefits, of course, of choosing the right market is a long-term stability and appreciation. All right, so just like before, take a moment, drop in the chat, and I want you to rate on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how well do you understand the concepts of selecting a market, selecting a team, selecting properties based on what we've covered? And you can either say phase 2 and put a number, or if you want to say market, I've
already categorized it.
Oh, you did? Oh, Jennifer already categorized it. Fabulous. Okay. Very good. Very good. So take a minute. Let's get in there and your self-evaluation. And Jennifer will give me the thumbs up when we're good to go. All right, scale of 1 to 10. How well do you feel like you understand these pieces? And how much do you need to bolster up your knowledge?
All right, go ahead.
All right. All right, so remember we talked about select, investigate, close, and manage. So now we're in the investigate part, right? Ooh, we got a lot to share with you. Okay, so under investigate, we have 3 primary sections, right? There's underwriting and calculating the right offer submission and negotiations, and then due diligence. So let's start with underwriting and calculating the right offer. So first of all, what is underwriting? So underwriting is a term that a lot of people are familiar with from like the lending standpoint, like, the underwriters, the people who are underwriting the loan. But in the world of apartment investing, underwriting is the terminology that we use for analyzing a deal. Okay, so we underwrite the deal, meaning we've done the financial analysis. So why do we do that? So you're going to underwrite the deal because it helps you to determine like what is the right purchase price based on your strategy. So your investing and your financing strategies are going to drive the type of analysis that you do. So you can underwrite it 2 different ways. One, let's say you're underwriting a stabilized property. So what you're really looking at is how does it perform right now based on getting a bank loan, paying your down payment, and having a stabilized performing cash flow property. All right, so it's fairly straightforward, but that's how you underwrite it. But what if you're doing a value add? If you're doing a value add, the way you underwrite it, it's going to be different, right? There's 2 different steps. One is you're evaluating or underwriting how it's performing right now today based on current management, current occupancy, current rents, current everything. And then you're also going to underwrite it for how it will be performing once the turnaround or the value add opportunity is complete. So there's this thing that happens in between, which means if you're going to do a value add, you need to go in and identify where is the opportunity. So is the opportunity to increase rents? Is it increase rents, but I'm going to have to drop $200,000 of money into the property to get the increased rents? Is it that I need to bring in a new management team? Is it that the expenses are out of control because they're not using, the RUBS system? So there's all these different things you have to take into account. So if you are underwriting it for the wrong strategy, I'll talk a little bit about where you could miss on that. Let me stay on track here. All right, but the whole purpose of underwriting is so that you can submit the right offer that makes sense based on what you're trying to do. All right, so let's talk about offer submission and negotiating. So submitting an offer is done in 2 stages typically. Nothing I ever say is going to be always, because one thing about real estate is it's always going to give you some random extra weird thing that's going to throw in. So I'm going to teach you more like generally how things work. So when you're making an offer on an apartment building, you're typically doing a letter of intent first, and it's usually non-binding. So a letter of intent is simple 1 or 2 page form that allows you to convey to the seller that one, you're interested in buying the property, and it allows you to talk about what some of the main terms are. So for example, price. So how much are you offering? How much earnest money deposit are you willing to put up? What kind of due diligence time frame are you looking for? And what kind of closing time frame are you looking for? Right? So those are the main things we're putting into the letter of intent, because if the seller gets it and is like, I have absolutely no interest, well, then we don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on the next stage of the offer submission process, which is the contract and the addendum, because it's a much more time consuming piece of it. All right, so LOI, and then once the letter of intent terms are solidified, then you're going into contract. Now with the contract, it's usually on a state approved form, and the contract is binding. So once you've made the offer, and you're always going to have an addendum with it when it comes to doing apartment buildings, because you need to ask for all of the items you're going to need to do your due diligence. Because if you don't include that in the addendum, you don't have a reason to get out based on this property, the rents are not what you said. All right, so it's going to be a contract with an addendum at that stage. The other thing that we're looking to do is, and I'm going to give you guys an example so that you can kind of like say, okay, that's how it works in the real world. So bear with me. The other thing that you're going to do during this offer submission time is, through conversation with the brokers and your broker, you're looking for opportunities to introduce like creative financing opportunities when they serve both the seller and you. And so let me just give you an example of a recent transaction with Vamsi, who I think Vamsi is on the class today. So hi, Vamsi. So Vamsi is working on a 12-unit townhouse portfolio, which for all intents and purposes is you do it the same way you do an apartment building, right? So it's 12 units, townhouses. So the whole transaction, the whole offer submission process started with a letter of intent. She offered $800,000. The seller wanted $912,000. So she said, I'm interested at $800,000. I'd give you $20,000 for earnest money deposit. I'd be looking for a 45-day due diligence period because we've got all this COVID stuff going on, and I'd want another 45 days to close. Now, she could probably close it faster than that, but what it did is give her, flexibility. So that letter of intent was then sent to the seller's agent, who presented it to the seller. So the seller goes, okay, so I have this potential buyer. I'm not doing $800,000, but I mean, maybe I could come down and, all right, I would do $840,000. Okay, so then negotiations start happening just on this non-binding letter of intent. So they came back with, I'll do $840,000, but I want a little bit more earnest money deposit. I want $25,000, right? And then there was, they were okay with the time frame on both the due diligence and the closing. But literally all these pieces are all negotiable, right? And then during that process, in talking to the brokers, we found out that the seller had owned the properties for 25 years, so like a really long time. And so my question was, well, is the seller going to be doing a 1031 exchange? Because if he is, then he's of course going to need all the money because he's going to run and roll it to the next property. And the broker initially said, no, he's not planning on doing a 1031 exchange. I said, okay, so can you please find out whether the seller would be willing to do any kind of seller financing? Because one of the things as Vamsi's pulling this deal together is she's looking at, can I self-fund this deal, or am I going to need to do like a small group fundraise or a joint venture, right? And so when we talked about it, I said, look, if the seller's willing to carry some of the financing, you might just be able to self-fund this and not bring anyone else into the deal. And that's the whole reason you would even ask that question. If the seller's willing to carry some money, it means you're bringing less money to the table, which makes the whole fundraising part of it simpler. All right, so during that time, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for opportunities to maybe get a little creative, especially if it's going to help the seller. Now, this is a little bit of an aside, but where it came into play for the seller, it turns out the seller did decide he wants to do a 1031 exchange. So it was off the table. But if he wasn't, that seller's going to get killed on income taxes. If he sells that building outright when he's owned it for 25 years and it's had a huge amount of appreciation over time and depreciation recapture, like he's going to get murdered on taxes. Like the IRS is going to have him for lunch. And so if he decides to carry the financing and only get a portion of the sales price now, but get a portion of it over time, he gets to spread out the tax implication and not pay so much taxes, or to defer the taxes. Anyway, that's why you would do that. And that's during the offer submission and negotiations. That's what you're looking for, opportunities to create a win-win situation that helps both you as the buyer and also the seller. All right, and then the third part of investigate is the due diligence. Okay, due diligence. I mean, it could not be more important if it tried. So the due diligence period is that period of time that is negotiated early on, that allows you to investigate the property, both operationally and physically. So typical time frame is usually 30 days for due diligence, but it can vary. The seller could come back and say, I want you to do it in 15 days, or you might say, I want 45 days for whatever reason, right? So you want to investigate the financial performance of the building before you start incurring inspection costs and paying for an appraisal and potentially environmental and surveys. Every lender is a little bit different as far as what they're going to require, but it all costs money, right? So you want to be very specific about making sure before you start spending money that the property makes sense financially. All right, so some of the things we're looking at during our operational due diligence is a T12, which a T12 is just short for trailing 12-month P&L. So what's common for a seller to give you is like a single financial statement. And here's the whole financial statement for the whole year. It's really hard to pick apart, like if there's something weird going on, when you get a summary of everything that happened in a year in one snapshot. So the reason you ask for a T12 is because it literally gives you January, February, March, April, May, June, blah, 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 throughout the year. Rents, maintenance, property taxes, insurance, property management, whatever. So it gives you a line item by month. So what if you see that every month the management was $500, but in June it was $5,000? You'd be like, okay, so that would be a red flag, and you'd circle it and go back and ask, what's the deal with this? And figure out, because what if there's some kind of agreement in place that you're stepping into and you don't realize that the manager gets bonused $5,000 every year, but you did your analysis based on $500 a month. So that's why you ask for a T12, so you can really pick out where the exceptions are and make sure you know what you're buying. All right, another thing that you're going to be looking at is rent roll or rent rolls. I always like to look at the current rent roll, but also the rent roll for the last couple of years, just to see, is it consistent, or did they just throw a whole bunch of tenants in the last couple months because they knew they were going to sell it? So that's why looking at the past rent rolls will give you an idea if there's something you need to look into further, right? And then if there's a property package, the property package is typically, it's almost like a sales document. It's them saying, here's information about the property. So that will help you just kind of get up to speed if they have that available. All right, now what about the physical part of the due diligence? So the physical part of the due diligence is something you do once you see, okay, operationally, everything looks good. Let me go ahead and pay an inspector. And that's where you have an inspector go in and make sure that physically the building is everything you think it's going to be, so that you don't end up having repair costs that you weren't expecting. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about due diligence and the importance of it, right? So why does it matter? Why does doing due diligence correctly matter? Nailing the due diligence is literally one of those important parts of the entire process. It shows you like what's real about the deal and either sets you up to be able to close in a smooth transition, or it can just maximize the cash flow. It helps you to identify if you need to retrade the property. So in the world of apartment investing, the verbiage retrade is like renegotiate. So in the 1 to 4 family world, we would say price reduction. In the multifamily world or apartment world, we say retrade. So by doing proper due diligence, you're going to see, do I need to retrade the property for a lower price? So you have to verify the operational performance of the property and investigate the physical condition of the property. You want to know exactly what you're closing on so that you can create a plan and successfully execute it once you close. So, but what happens if you mess up the due diligence and you skip parts? I almost don't even want to talk about it, but let's talk about it. Missing any part of the due diligence can have a really, really negative impact on what you were going to make on this deal. And let me give you an example of this. So something you want to review when you're doing due diligence is property taxes. So why? Like, why? I mean, they're telling me how much the property taxes are. Why am I making a big deal about it? So property taxes for the seller may or may not be the same as they're going to be for you. All right, and let me explain this. So in California, as in many other states, we have Prop 13 here. Prop 13 basically for the property owner caps the property taxes. So as long as you own the property, they can only raise the taxes or the taxable value so much. But as soon as you sell the property, that cap is lifted and the assessed value goes up to whatever the market assessed value is. So if you're operating in a market where they have something like that, and it's put in place to help protect property owners from basically being property tax spread out of their property, right? So if you're looking at the financials that the seller gave you and you're thinking that that's going to be your property taxes, not realizing, well, gosh, over 25 years, especially if you start getting into the millions of dollars of purchase prices, let's just say you have a $30,000 error in property taxes, which is that's very doable when you get into like the multi-million-dollar range. If you make a $30,000 error in the property taxes, that could mean a $300,000 negative impact on the value of the property, right? Because the property taxes is one of the expenses. So the expenses drive the net operating income. So if your net operating income is $30,000 lower than you thought, the value of your property could be $300,000 lower than you thought. And that could totally wreck your whole value play opportunity. So due diligence is key. Like if you don't conduct a complete and a thorough due diligence, you are massively increasing the risk of overpaying for the property. Because if you knew what the property taxes were going to be, you'd be like, okay, I got to retrade this property. I can't pay this much for it because the deal doesn't work, knowing what it's going to be for me, right? So you're increasing the risk of overpaying for the property, or worse, not being financially prepared for capital expenditures or repairs that could have been exposed if you'd done the proper due diligence. Okay, so one is the operational due diligence, the other is the physical. All right, you want to nail this. So when you go through due diligence and you do it properly, you have like clarity on the future performance of the property. You know if you need to request a reduction in the purchase price, and you're able to do an accurate assessment of any value add opportunity, both from an equity standpoint and from a cash flow standpoint. All right, so like before, let's do a quick check-in. So how well do you feel like you understand the concepts of underwriting and calculating the right offer and submitting the offer and doing the due diligence based on what we've covered? So drop that in the chat. All right, you guys ready to move to the next step?
Mm-hmm.
So we did select, phase 1 to 2, investigate, and now we're on close. All right, so close we're going to break into 2 phases as well. So close, phase 1, is going to be, we're going to focus on lender financing and then the investor/partner funding. All right, so the timeline of a deal is, you're selecting your strategy, you're selecting your team, you're making your offers, getting your offers accepted, you're going to due diligence, and that time between the end of your due diligence and the time you close, that's like a pre-closing time frame. So that's kind of the timing that some of this ends up happening. We're going to get into more detail on that. But we're going to focus right now on lender financing and investor financing, all right, or investor funding. So in lender financing, there's a couple of different things. One is like conventional or commercial lender, or a portfolio lender, and it depends on what the project is. All right, so some of the considerations, the things that you need to be thinking about when you're choosing a loan or a lender or a program is the term of the loan. Term of the loan means how long do you get to keep that loan in place? Is there a balloon payment? So the term of the loan would be, term would be a combination of an amortization period and a balloon payment. So the term of the loan is how long do you get to keep the loan. A balloon payment is when they're doing an amortization, which is how they calculate how long to spread the payments over. So let's say they're doing a 25-year amortization, but there's a 10-year balloon. That means that you're not paying the loan off in 10 years, like on a monthly basis. If the loan was in fact there for 25 years, you'd end up paying it off at the end of year 25. But a balloon payment at year 10 means that basically you're going to have to either refinance it or sell it before then. It means that the bank wants their money back after 10 years. And so what they did is they created all sorts of interest for themselves. So it's quite brilliant on the lender's part. All right, so amortization period. So how long is the amortization period? And in apartment investing, you're probably going to find that the most common amortization period is like 25 years. You sometimes see 30 years. So 25 to 30 years. Is the loan fixed or is it adjustable? Is it interest only or is it amortized? And what kind of impound requirements are they going to have? So recently, Bobby, who's actually on this webinar as well, he was working on a portfolio purchase, and as he was getting into it, he was realizing, oh shoot, the lender is asking for impounds. Well, so what impounds are is when they ask, when a lender asks for impounds, they want to know that they are holding like some of the property taxes and the insurance, so that when it comes time to pay them, they can be paid. So every month, as far as your payment, just like with your single family home, your primary residence, you probably make a PITI payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Well, when you're doing multifamily, you're dealing with a commercial lender, it's going to be the same thing. Every month you're paying 1/12 of the property taxes and 1/12 of the insurance. Well, when you close the deal initially, they frequently want to have a few months of that up front, but every lender is different. So you have to find out what their impound requirements are so that you can accurately assess how much money you're going to need at the closing. All right, so and then another possibility is a hard money lender. So the hard money lender, that's going to be if you're doing a value add project that requires renovation. And if you need that kind of loan and a conventional lender is not going to make the loan because the property condition is too bad, then you're going to be working with a hard money lender. Now, those are typically short term, like 1 to 3 years, and they're usually interest only. All right, now let's talk a little bit about investor or partner funding. So this is if you're doing like a joint venture. If you're self-funding it, then you don't really have to worry about this part. But if you're going to be funding the deal and even if you only have one partner, if you have a couple of partners, communication is absolutely key. So we're in phase 1 of like the close phase. We're kind of like in pre-closing. You need to be communicating with your joint venture partners and making sure they know how much money are we going to need, and pulling it all together, and when are we going to need it? How does it need to get there, and what's going on? So if you are not staying on top of your communication, like you might end up losing one of your money partners, not realizing it, and then you try to close, and good luck. So communication is important. You could do Zoom meetings, you could do GoToWebinar, you could do FaceTime. There's any number of things, but you want to make sure you're in good communication and keeping everyone apprised of the progress towards the closing to make sure that you can actually close. All right, another thing you're going to want to do is do some kind of shared drive. And you could do like Dropbox or Google Drive, just something where everybody who's involved with the deal can see and access the documents that you need them to have in order to successfully move towards the closing. And another thing you can do is you can have a Facebook page or a Facebook group for the project, where the people that are involved in the project are the ones that are the members of the group, or that are on the page. And that way you have a single place for everything that can be on the web. Or if you're super savvy, you could do a website. Now, we're not super savvy, but I like the idea of the Facebook group. So why is the lender financing part important? That's the part we're going to really focus on. Why does understanding the lender financing really matter? Why do you need to be really good at it? Why do you need to nail that when you're moving into apartment investing? When you're getting into any kind of deal, you have to begin with the end in mind, right? What's your exit strategy and what kind of financing is the best fit? So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say that the project is a value add project that doesn't require a lot of renovation. Let's say it's performing, but the rents are under market. So there's an opportunity for increasing the revenue, and or decreasing expenses. It's mostly a management play. In that case, you probably don't need a hard money lender. But let's say that your goal is to go in and do a value play, maximize the net operating income, and sell in 3 years. All right, so separate, right? So in 3 years, we're going to be out of the property. do you really want to end up paying a higher interest rate in order to get a 25 or a 30-year fixed rate loan? Because oftentimes, if you want that long-term security of the lending, you're paying for it. You're going to pay a higher rate for a 25 or 30-year term loan. Or are you going to be open to a 5-year adjustable arm where you can get a lower interest rate in order to maximize your cash flow during the period you own the property? So do you see, like, when we go all the way back to strategy, you have to know your strategy, because your strategy is going to drive what kind of lender financing you're going to use. Like, does that make sense? So what if your goal, let's just say, what if your goal was to increase the value of the property by increasing the NOI, and then you want to refinance the property in 3 years to maybe pull out some of the equity, maybe pay off your investors? So same question, are you really going to want to get a 25 or 30-year fixed rate loan if you're going to pay a higher interest rate? No, because your strategy is not in line with paying a premium for a longer term fixed rate loan, because you're planning on refinancing it in 3 years. Okay, I mean, I could probably give you 100 different examples to help drive the point home. I'm just going to give you a few so you can really start wrapping your mind around, wow, there's a lot of pieces that have to be considered. So let's say that you are planning on buying a long-term buy and hold for passive cash flow, right? You're looking at 2 different loans, both of which have a 25-year amortization. All right, cool. But one has a 10-year balloon payment. Is that something you really want to consider? So knowing that your plan is to just hold it long-term, do you really want to be in a position where in 10 years you're forced to refinance it or sell it? Probably not. But if your plan was to hold it for 5 or 10 years and then do a 1031 exchange into a larger building, well, you probably would take a loan that has a 10-year balloon payment, right? Does that make sense? So you have to piece all these different things together, know what your strategy is, line it up both with the type of lender and with the type of loan, and ask a lot of questions to make sure that the loan that you get is the one that makes the most sense. So there's just so many things to understand when you're strategizing the right kind of financing for your exit strategy. So what if you don't understand it and you just get it wrong? If you fail to learn about financing, what kind of financing makes the most sense for your plan strategy? There's a couple of downsides, right? If you're doing a value play where the exit strategy is to sell or refinance after a period of time, and you end up with a loan that has a longer prepayment penalty, you could totally screw yourself as far as having like a huge fee imposed when you go to sell it or refinance it. And that could just strip out all the all the profit or equity that you had just created. All right, so another possibility is if you don't think to ask the right questions and you make assumptions about the amount of capital that you need to be prepared to close, and then you realize when it's too late that you don't have enough funds to close the deal, now talk about stress, now you're scrambling to get another investor in or get your investors to put in more money to raise more funds. And if you don't pull it all together, like, the deal falls apart. And it's just, that is the worst feeling in the world. And you just never want to be in that position. So anyway, it's important. So what are the benefits of mastering the financing piece? So mastering the financing piece really makes you an incredible strategic partner, for anyone who wants to do business with you, and even just for yourself. Your ability to evaluate all of the different options and line those options up with what makes the most sense for you, your strategy, and your investors is going to make you rock your deals and maximize your profit. All right, so let's do what we've done before. Let's do a quick little check-in on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do you feel like you understand the concepts of lender financing and investor partner funding? All right. All right, this last couple are going to go a little quicker. All right, so close phase 2 is the pre-closing and the closing. So with pre-closing, really all that means is it's that period of time, again, between due diligence and the time you close, where you're pulling everything together, your funding, your insurance, your asset protection, getting your LLC set up, figuring out what does your lender want, and then going through, like, from the title company and reviewing the closing statement and making sure that it's accurate, okay, which it pretty much never is. So I like to call this part of the deal, the part of the deal where you're herding cats. And it's very, very chaotic. And Steve Caro, who's also on this webinar, can tell you he just closed 10 units on Friday of last week. And he had 2 different sellers. I think it was 6 different properties. There was a lender involved. And like the closing statements were all wrong, but in different ways. And the lender's asking for stuff at the last minute. Like it's just like straight up nuts, the pre-closing. So you really have to be the one who's the project manager and pulls everything together. So, closings can be really elusive. So if you're not acting as a really kick-ass project manager, it's unlikely that all the moving parts are going to come together for a successful close. So you really have to be the one who's like, okay, this is what I need from you. This is what I need. What do you need? Okay, I need this by tomorrow. Did they get it to you by tomorrow? Okay, and just you're literally like making sure it's all coming together because you're the one, like you're the one who's educated. You're the only one that knows how to pull all the pieces together. Nobody cares about your deal more than you do or about closing it on time. You're the only one. So you're the one pulling it all together. All right, and as far as the closing part, closing it's actually super anticlimactic because you're usually doing it remotely. You're just signing some documents and the mobile notary comes, witnesses your signature, and then they FedEx the package, and then you're wiring funds. So the closing itself is fairly boring. The pre-closing is all sorts of, I'd say exciting, but exciting may or may not be the exact right word. All right, but pre-closing, so why is it important? All right, so like I said, the closings can be elusive. You're dealing with lender financing and all of their crazy requests, which are often last minute, plus potentially having JV partners and making sure that they have what they need. Have they signed the right documents? Have they sent in their funds? Is there any questions that they have? Making sure you get the right kind of insurance policy. That on top of it, your lender has to approve. I can't tell you how many closings or like the few days before closing, we have the insurance policy exactly what they want, but the lender's like, oh, can you please have them add this one little thing? Sure, could we not have done that 2 weeks ago? For whatever reason, everything happens at the last possible minute, right? So you gotta have the right insurance policy. Your lender has to approve it. You're dealing with the title company. You're making sure your LLC is set up. If it's not an LLC in that state, it's gotta be registered as a foreign entity. Like you're pulling all these things together. Your operating agreement has to be dialed in. You're reviewing the closing statements that are frequently wrong, and sometimes they're wrong 4 times. So you say, hey, these things are wrong. You send it back, title fixes it, sends it back to you, and now it's either still not right or now it's wrong in a new way. Okay, so it's straight up crazy town. It's herding cats. And I'll give you a quick little example. So Steve Caro is in our mastermind, right? And so he went through the portfolio closing last week, and he came up with so many random requests. So he's been closing properties. I think he's at like 19 units since he started the mastermind 3 months ago. So he's been closing. He's been getting a lot of good experience. But this is the first time he was closing like a whole bunch of properties at once. So he came on the mastermind. He was all, okay, let me just tell you guys, like it's nuts. He came across so many random requests, issues, challenges, and opportunities to keep it all together, all within the last few days. Now, it's not like anyone didn't know the closing was happening. It was like a 6-week closing. Plenty of time for all these requests and questions to come in, but everything happens at the last minute. So your ability to keep it all together, keep calm, handle one brick at a time will ultimately bring you to the closing. And he did. And it's funny because he works as a physician assistant. And so, I mean, we have COVID going on, and he works in the medical field. So of course things are absolutely crazy at work as well. But he just, one step at a time, but he was like, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts and ridiculous. Like, why are they asking for stuff at the last minute? Like, yeah, because they do, and it's frustrating. But your job is just to pull it all together. So what happens if you don't get it right in this pre-closing stage? So if you're not the one to pull it all together, the deal's gonna fall apart. There has to be a captain, there has to be a CEO that understands all of the moving parts, how they fit, who needs to do what. And if you fail to understand the process and move everything towards a successful close, the deal dies. Earnest money deposit is lost. And you end up with a string of frustrated and angry team members and investors because you didn't pull it all together. But what happens when you're awesome at dealing with pre-closing? You close, you make money, you instill confidence in your investors and your entire team, and you are a total rock star. All right, so this pre-closing part it's super important. All right, so quick self-evaluation on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do you feel like you have your arms around this part of the process? All right. Looks like the chat number has slowed. Okay. All right. So last one that I'm going to talk about, and we're not going to get into super detail on this one because frankly, this stage, the managed stage is post-closing. And for people who are just getting started with apartment investing, the first 3 steps, select, investigate, and close, are the big hurdles that keep you from getting started. So those are the big ones that you have to get through. But once you do, the next step is managing the deal. So I just want you to at least kind of have an idea of what is next. So depending on what your exit strategy is, the managing the deal part can look pretty different. So if you're doing a stabilized asset, then you're dealing with property management. So you have monthly cash flow coming in, you're looking at your reports that come in every month, you're asking questions, you set key performance indicators just to make sure that the property management and the property manager is doing their job. All right, so not a ton to do there, but that's what you're dealing with after you close if it's stabilized. If you're dealing with a value add project or a stabilization project, well, first of all, you're the one with the whole strategy. So you're managing your entire team and you're basically handling the strategic implementation of the entire plan. All right, so that's kind of what's coming later once you've actually closed. And that's something that we kind of get into. It's a little bit more advanced. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about like what are the next steps. So now that you've had an opportunity to evaluate your steps or evaluate yourself, I'm guessing that there may be some gaps or areas that you need to master in order to make this work for you. So what I want to do, I'm super excited. I want to introduce you to a key member of our team. Some of you might have seen her if you've been watching the 1031 exchange series we've been doing. I think we've done 4 of those videos so far. Kimberly is the one who's doing that. And anyway, I have known Kimberly for 12 years. It might be more than 12 now. And she is wicked smart when it comes to apartment investing. Like I have a lot of different random experience. I've done every different kind of deal, including some apartments. Kimberly is a specialist. All that she's been doing has been apartment investing, and especially when it comes to helping new investors navigate challenges and get results. So I'm really excited to introduce her to you, and I'm gonna in just a minute I gotta figure out how, but I'm gonna hand it over and have her introduce herself. But Kimberly is just an absolute wealth of knowledge, and Jennifer and I just feel really lucky to have her it's like she's our lead coach in our apartment acquisition program. So I'm going to hand the baton over to Kimberly and just have her spend a few minutes letting you get to know her and letting you see just what an absolute rock star she is. Like her brain is so big when it comes to this stuff. And just as an apartment investing specialist, as a coach, and just as a human being. So I'm going to have Kimberly introduce herself and then just talk about what some of her students have been doing. So Kimberly, oh wait, I think you're unmuted. Let's just see.
I think so. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, I have to mute myself. Please hold, mute myself. I can't
Can you hear me?
figure out where my mouse is.
How about now? Can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted on my side. Yeah? Okay. Hey, everybody. Greetings from my backyard. I do real estate, so I can hang out in my backyard and then go do real estate when I need to. Anyway, thank you, Stacy, for letting me just come on and talk for a minute with the group here. Hey, everybody out there watching. I think you're just in an amazing place and time right now that you're interested in multifamily apartments. I commend you for being here and taking this time. It's pretty interesting out there right now. And so just Stacy and Jennifer asked if I could come on and just spend a couple of minutes with you and also give you some of our just some client wins that people just like you, just like me, just like Stacy and Jennifer have been accomplishing in real estate the last couple of years and even just recently. So my background, nothing special. My background was in music, classical piano. I was not somebody that went to college for real estate. Got an environmental science degree. I was kind of into saving the planet sort of stuff, so don't hold that against me. And I ended up working for the garbage companies. That's kind of where I cut my teeth creating recycling programs for cities and counties, and that kind of led into contracts. And I used to go out to the landfill and dig in the trash to actually do waste characterizations on how much was in there and how I could fix the recycling program. So they would joke at the Chamber of Commerce that I was a trashy lady. Anyway, so real estate, it was one of those things I got really burnt out on the politics of it, of garbage, and just quit. And I had met my wonderful man of my life, Gary, who was living on a sailboat in Orange County. And I just wanted to figure out a way to make money from anywhere. That's where it all started. And so that we could go sail around the world and have adventures and whatever that was going to look like. So 2008, that put me into real estate, which at the time everybody thought I was crazy for doing. So if anybody thinks you're crazy for getting into real estate, know that you are on the right track. You're with the right kind of crazy. And so it was, I invested in my education. I knew nothing about real estate. I knew nothing about having a business. And I ended up finding out that I had a niche for fixing mistakes. And I like details. So whatever you like, trust me, you can do that in real estate. And so I ended up carving out a business in real estate, and I never did single family homes. People like Stacy and Jennifer that have done single family homes, I just think are amazing. I skipped right past them. They couldn't do them. Tried. Trust me, I tried, and got right into multifamily. And I ended up running a portfolio for an investor who loved to negotiate and was really good at it, loved it. But he was not so great at operations. And so I ended up, together, we grew that portfolio to about 12 different apartment buildings, 30 different single family homes we turned into notes. We raised millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars with self-directed retirement funds, and bought all of the properties with private capital. And this was pretty much from like 2008 until like, I don't know, 2017. We got into commercial buildings. We got into short-term rentals. So, but apartment buildings were really my favorite part. So I share that with you just so you know, you don't have to have a fancy background in real estate to get in it and do well. And whatever you already do really well is what's going to take you through this next journey. So if I think with that, let's show a couple of the client wins. These are people that we've worked with who have followed these exact steps, and they were able to buy their first apartment buildings, and did not come with necessarily big fancy backgrounds in real estate. So let me share, because this is what always got me excited, and it's what gets me excited for everybody here on this call right now, is that you can do it. I know you can do it. Every single one of us here knows you can do it. And so we're excited to see you taking that next step. So anyway, Jennifer and Mary Alice, cute ladies. Oh my gosh. So they are from Dallas, and did their market analysis. We're looking at what they wanted to do in real estate. No background really. Mary Alice was the one on the right. Jennifer's the one on the left. And Jennifer was an architect. So she would go build huge projects, right? So you would think, okay, she's got background in real estate. Sure, this will be no big deal for them. But the problem was that Jennifer was still employed. And so that was going to put Mary Alice on the leading the company, basically. And Mary Alice, her background was in counseling for drug addiction. She was like a 30, 40-year educator. So, you know, she's going to run this real estate, and she was a bit of an HGTV junkie and wanted to make everything pretty. So we had to work through that. And that was definitely an obstacle, because when you get into multifamily, you can absolutely make it pretty. Don't get me wrong. You can make it pretty, but there's pretty and there's profitable, and then there's a happy place in the medium where something is clean and safe and habitable, and people are very happy to have it. So we had to work through that. That was a big obstacle for them to, you know, really empower Mary Alice, who was starting, you know, basically her third career and feeling a bit overwhelmed, like, you know, Jennifer should be doing it. And so we found this little fiveplex for them in Chicago, and it was really a lot of the clients that we work with end up doing value add, because there's a lot of opportunity to make money faster, to grow your wealth more quickly through value add. So this was just a fiveplex. It was a cute little building, nice property, kind of on the northwest side of Chicago. So if you're familiar with Chicago, it's, you know, it's a pretty decent little neighborhood. And we could get in it. They could fix up the NOI. They were buying it. It was making about $24,000, $25,000 when they picked it up. We did all the analysis together. They saw how they could raise the income up to almost $50,000, reposition it by either selling it or doing a cash out refi on it, or the BRRRR strategy, whatever you want to call that, and pulling out $200,000. And it's a fiveplex, so something like that they could knock out in like a year or less. And we literally found that project within 2 months of working together. So was pretty overwhelming for the two of them, and really exciting. So when they did that, they saw a way to actually get Jennifer retired from her corporate career within 2 years. They're like, oh my gosh, we could just do a little fiveplex a year and start building up $200,000 chunks of money every year. Okay, I might convince some of you over to value add and not just cash flow. Okay, so let's show them the next one. So the next client that we worked with, Carolyn, oh my gosh, this woman, I love her, and she so busted my chops so hardcore when we first met. She had a lot of fear about investing in real estate. Didn't come, again, with big background in real estate. And she had a condo in the Bay Area. She wanted to get into it because, again, they were trying to retire. She was trying to retire her husband, so trying to retire her significant other. And they had an asset, and but it was making no money. And that's one of the things that is so great to just sit with each one of you one-on-one and talk about and go over and look at and work through, and you're part of this organization, that this asset wasn't doing anything for them. So how could we get it to work for them? And so that's what we were focusing on, was getting that repositioned for her. And so it was a lot of fear that we had to overcome in the beginning, because she was incredibly scared to make the wrong decision and to lose this nest egg that they had, even though it wasn't doing anything for them. She was terrified and didn't want to let her husband down, even though he was like her biggest cheerleader. She just didn't want to disappoint him. So ironically, her property that we found was a 16-plex in Chicago. So I'm not endorsing Chicago. Every city has its own pros and cons, and they're unique to every one of you. So some of you might find stuff in Chicago, and some of you are like, heck no, I don't ever want to go to Chicago. That's fine. But what was cool about this is it's just a 16-unit building, which isn't huge. It doesn't have to be huge. And so for her, Carolyn really has this heart for community and to help people. She has a bent towards the nonprofit world, which is beautiful. So when she goes into her real estate, this was something that not only was she going to be fixing up, it was a fully occupied building, but she was going to be improving the neighborhood. And that really gave her that was what made it possible for her to do it. The one big thing that she had to kind of overcome was that she wasn't going to be this evil landlord. She was actually going to be able to create a community for people and to improve the neighborhood at the same time. And so it was really cool too, because then we worked through, she ended up doing a cost segregation analysis on her property right after she purchased it, and found an additional depreciation that she could recapture, which, you know, if you've got W-2 income and you're looking for ways to offset that, this is apartments are a beautiful way to do it. It's fantastic. So anyway, she's still working through this project. It took her about 6 months of us working together in order to identify the perfect project for her. And once she's got it done, it was kind of tears when she found it. It was pretty awesome. And when she gets it done and she'll have it cash flowing, she'll be in a position to, you know, she could keep it for the cash flow. I mean, $191,000 a year isn't so bad. But really there's a lot of upside on this one. She has almost $760,000 of equity that she's creating. So it's pretty life-changing. A 16-unit project is something that you could easily work through in about 2 years and get it stabilized and repositioned to either refinance it or to sell it. So that was pretty cool. And then the last client that we wanted to share with you is Ryan. And so Ryan, it's everybody's kind of got their own happy place in real estate. Some of us are comfortable with like just a 5-plex, and that's awesome. And then some of us are like, when I sit down and we talked, you know, together about what your specific plan is, it's like, Kimberly, if I don't look at anything that's like 100 doors or more, I'm not interested. Okay, cool. That's fine. Ryan was kind of more like that. So the very first project that we looked at together was a $10 million deal. Awesome. Not a problem. He could have pulled it off, but he realized it was a bit hairier than he wanted to really do in the beginning. And he ended up coming across, and this one, he actually just closed on this one in December. And so Ryan picked this up in St. Louis. So the challenge for Ryan was that he really wanted to do real estate in his own backyard, which is in Florida. And he just was having a hard time in the beginning picturing doing something out of state and remote, because there's more risk if you just can't walk over there and do it. Now, I've never done anything in my backyard. Everything I've done's been across the country. The portfolio I built with the gentleman I was mentioning in the beginning was in Memphis and Colorado and Georgia, you know. So I don't do California. I live in California. Don't do California. Anyway, so Ryan, he was really struggling with the idea of doing something out of state, but then he found this deal, 2.8 million, which for some of you is going to go like, oh my God, 2.8 million. I hear you. I get it. I totally get it. But I promise you that there's going to come a day in the not too distant future, you stay plugged in, you stay connected, you stay moving forward, and you're going to be like, it's only $1 million. It's only $1 million. You will, and you'll Facebook me and tell me that. It'll be awesome. So got this property, and actually what was really cool about this deal was that he, when he closed on it, it was appraised at 3.1. So it was already worth more than he was buying it for. And he got $77,000 back at closing, which is, he could use as a credit, which means you bring less equity to closing, or you can take that out and put it towards the renovation. So again, Ryan, he had some experience in real estate. So he was prepared for something with a little bit of meat on its bones. And he has been renovating these buildings. So he's doing it, he's doing it a building at a time. And when he gets it finished, he'll be able to hold it. I mean, $259,000 a year in cash flow. Or he can reposition it, do a cash out refund. What he's thinking right now is he'll do a cash out refi and then go pick up another building and keep this one and go do it again. But what was really kind of crazy about Ryan because there's always something that happens, right? We all have something we've got to work through, or that mental block, right? That one thing that keeps us. And so, whether it's you're worried about displacing people and how can you help the community, or you want to make everything pretty, or you don't know enough. So for Ryan, we were about 10 days before closing, and I got a call from him, and he had been working through his due diligence, and he calls me up and he's like, oh my God, I don't have my down payment. I'm like, okay, how much do you need? He goes, so Ryan was doing a 1031, and so he had some capital he was putting in, and his 1031 broke and he couldn't get the money out, which meant he wasn't going to be able to close. And so it's like, I had meetings lined up all day. But I found time for him. We hashed it out. I said, look, if you don't mind me talking while I'm eating breakfast before I got to run off to meetings to go look at real estate. And he's like, I just need your help. So I'm like, okay, cool. And so he needed to find $400,000 in order to close in the next 2 weeks. Yeah. And he was freaking out. He was totally freaking out. So, because that was completely unplanned for. And you will have an 11th hour crisis. That's where having a network to draw from really helps. And so Ryan's like, I need your help. So I said, all right, well, cool. Good news. You found your 11th hour issue. So congratulations. That's great. You probably don't have any other big 11th hour issues coming. We'll get this fixed. And what can we do? And we just brainstormed. We knocked out some ideas. I gave him some suggestions. I'm like, you're going to find the money. Okay. That's not going to happen. This is going to close. So, and I said, I'll make some calls. Let's see what we can pull together. So about 24 to 36 hours later, we reconnected kind of cross space, and he goes, oh my God, you were so right. You're never going to believe it. I found the money. I'm like, yeah, okay. What'd you do? What happened? Because I had some money lined up for him, but we're going to have to piece it together. And it's just easier if you could get one person to cover it. And so imagine within 36 hours being able to just come up with $400,000. Okay. So that's what just happened. And it's possible. It's absolutely possible. And so what happened was he's talking to everybody. He knows I'm talking to everybody I know. And he went back to his lender, and he was telling his lender kind of the situation. The lender's like, hey, I think you should sit down with the bank president. And the bank president and Ryan sat down, and the bank president says, I do private loans, and I know your money's going to come in. So I'll cover you for the next, 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll work out this arrangement and it'll be fine. And hey, by the way, if you ever have any other deals in the future you want to take a look at, I'd be glad to look at doing them with you. So not only did Ryan in his 11th hour crisis, reach out for help. We worked through the issue. He followed the action steps that I gave him. He found the money, and he got lined up with a significantly well-capitalized private lender for future deals. So that's just kind of what's out there, and what's happening, and this happening today. So Ryan closed in December. We talk probably a couple times a month just to see how things are going. He's been renovating units in COVID and receiving above market rent. So don't be worried about COVID. Okay, don't let that stop you. Go out there, do a good product, follow the system, and it works. And so he thought he was underwriting his deal at, I think it was 600 for his 1 bedrooms, and he's getting like 650. I might have been 575, and now he's getting 650 on the 1 bedrooms. And he had underwritten the 2 bedrooms at 750, and I think he's getting 805 on those now. So all of these numbers are actually even better because in COVID, he's still renting without having these units sit, and they're above market rent. So it's pretty cool stuff. And it's the time is now. So there you go. Thanks, Stacy, for letting me share some of that, with the group. I appreciate it.
I love it.
You guys can do it.
It's just so exciting. And when I had asked Kimberly, hey, could you send us some of the more recent ones, like what their numbers are, there was a whole bunch of them. We just had to pick 3. So anyway, we're gonna have Kimberly run the Q&A. So I'm gonna work on transitioning this back to her in just a minute. But hey guys, we're honored to be part of your journey, and we can't wait to highlight you in your first deal, like to the next generation of new investors. Like all these guys, this is their first big project, and like they're killing it. So just like imagine what it's gonna feel like the first time you see a deposit in your bank account and you didn't have to go to work. to get it. And then it keeps showing up every month. Like, think about how confident you're going to feel when you have an abundance of passive income to live on. And for once you retire from your job, all because of a decision that you made to get started now. So just like envision waking up knowing you no longer have to trade your time for money. Now you have options. Now, if you're Steve Caro, you'll have a ton of cash flow coming in and you're still going to go to work because that's just what you do and you love where you work. Cool. Woohoo. Like, you have options. It's just so good. Just imagine the relief that you feel when you're on the other side of your first deal. Like, and the process is no longer this big, scary mystery. Now you have a system that you can replicate over and over. And then finally, I just want you to think about like the legacy that you're creating, not only with the assets that you're acquiring, but also with the knowledge that you gain and having the ability to pass that knowledge down to the next generation. So, you know, the information's on here, but our team has set aside time on our calendars to meet with you. So, you know, we're going to diagnose exactly where you're struggling. And you had a chance to start kind of doing some self-diagnosis, so you have an idea, but we're going to help you figure out like where are you struggling and help you to customize your plan. We will ask you to fill out a short questionnaire before we set up a time to chat. And the questionnaire is just really designed to help us identify like what resources you have available to get you on the fast track to investing in apartments. So you want to be as thorough as possible when you fill out the questionnaire so that we can help customize a realistic strategy for you. So, you know, obviously, if there's an opportunity for us to help you get there, we would love to do that. But these calls, are no pressure, it's no obligation. If we can't help you, we'll at least point you towards resources that will get you started. Like, we really want to see you succeed. So anyway, here's what you need to do. You would text the word apartments to our cell phone, and that number is 619-373-8461. And I have it set up that once you text in apartments to our number, it'll shoot you back a link to the questionnaire. So you get the questionnaire, it should only take you a couple minutes to fill it out. Once you're done with the questionnaire, just shoot me back a text real quick that just says done. Well, and your name, because I probably won't know your phone number just from being in my phone, unless we're already in contact. But just send me a text message with your name and phone number, or your first and last name and the word done, and that way I'll know that your questionnaire is done, and I'll go ahead and schedule a call for you so we can help you figure out your strategy. So anyway, it's just been an honor. What I want to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to actually bring all of you guys in. I'm going to make you panelists, so you'll disappear for a second and pop in. Please turn your video on, and we'll just do an open Q&A, and any questions you have, Kimberly will answer, and we'll just rock it. So let me make sure everyone has that number, 619-373-8461. And maybe you could throw that in the chat.
I'm done.
Okay, cool. All right, so give me a second to stop sharing. And Kimberly, give me just a moment to bring everyone over. And then we'll go from there. I know you had a couple of people that had asked questions early on. Do you want to ask one of them while we're doing this? Okay. I'll bring everyone over.
I'm kind of afraid to do my microphone because it's going to cause that issue.
Oh, here, I'll do it. Okay. Yeah, okay, so I'm not sure who asked this question, but oh yeah. Okay.
I didn't put the names. I just started writing them down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So someone had asked the question, can I do this with no experience? So like basically, do I have to be experienced in order to start investing in apartments?
Oh, great question. And that answer is no. What I found working with people getting started in apartment investing, and is that whatever you do really well already, everybody does something well. You do something well. I promise you have a superpower. And if you don't know it, then schedule the call and we'll find it. But everybody has a superpower. And whatever that superpower is what you're going to leverage in real estate. And that's what you're going to kind of build your business around. And we can help you, kind of put that together on the phone call. But yeah, you don't need to have experience. I never did single family homes. I've wholesaled one house. Okay. I mean, I guess I sort of did it, but it was the most painful experience ever. So no, you don't need to have real estate experience.
Awesome. Okay. So I started bringing everyone over. So if you guys can turn your videos
Hey everyone, it's so good to see you.
Kimberly can see you. It's so much much easier to do Q&A when you feel like you're actually talking to people. So
Yeah.
I love it. Marlene.
We got some people outside. Steve's outside.
Love it.
Awesome.
Okay, so we'll open for Q&A. I do have a couple of questions written down, but we'll let people ask those questions live first. And if we have a slow, I'll ask one of the questions that were sent in. All right, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. Unless you don't have the ability to, then I might have to fix a setting. All right, does anyone have a question and you can't unmute yourself? No? All right, should I just go into the questions that were sent in? You have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask that question. All right. Next question I have was, do I have to have money? Do I have to have money to invest?
That is a really common question. And the answer is it would be easier, of course, right? You know, if you had $500,000 sitting there in the bank, it's a lot easier to get started, sure. But even if you did, I would strongly recommend that you really consider learning how to raise capital rather than use your own capital. So the reason is because you could, you know, go get all your money tied up in an awesome deal tomorrow, right? And then the deal of the century comes by in a week from now, and your money's tied up because you just closed on a good deal, but maybe not the best deal. And so it's a fundamental skill to learn how to raise capital. And I don't mean by going out there and getting hundreds of people into a deal. My investor groups now tend to be just like 2 to 5 people. I don't like big groups. I like small groups of investors who we're just going to go do a project together. You know, people I like is a really important thing. And it's where most of the money comes from. So it's an interesting time too right now. Right now, there are a lot of high net worth investors who have been watching the market. This is not their first market cycle that they've been through. And they have, I'm sure, been hearing the phrase dry powder if you're kind of watching any real estate stuff. So what that means is that there's a lot of people out there right now who have money who haven't been putting it into the market because they've been waiting for a correction to come. And that correction has arrived in the form of COVID. And so there's some things that are going to be happening that create these opportunities for people like us who know how to put together deals to help the people with the dry powder, the capital that's been sitting on the sidelines, to get in. So you definitely do not need to have money. And even if you did, I would, we'd be talking about how to go find somebody else's.
Love it. All right. All right, do we have any other questions from the live people in the group? We have a lot of people who are watching on Facebook, and I was like, if you want to ask questions, come into the webinar. I want to give you guys first priority. Any questions that anyone wants to ask before I go to the next one? No? All right. Let me see. Oh, actually, I think you just answered that about is now an okay time to buy. Okay, how about, is bank financing available?
Yeah, absolutely. It's changed. It's definitely changed. It wasn't so difficult the last few years to find financing where you could go out and get 80% loan to value LTV or 90% loan to value even. That would be pretty tricky to find right now, but local banks absolutely need to still get their money deployed. This is not a mortgage crisis like it was in 2008. So the underwriting terms have changed though. And so it's something right now to anticipate having to put a little bit more down. So being prepared to do more like a 30 to 40% down. Interest rates are still amazing. I don't know if anybody out there, if you do, put a I remember in the comments or something, but like anybody remember 13% interest rate, 8% interest rate, 9% interest rate? Like we don't have that today. We don't have that today, right? Thank you. We got like 5%. We got 4%. And depending upon the asset, there's still even like 3 3/4% out there. So yeah, so financing is absolutely a possibility. But honestly, raising the capital is a lot easier than doing a bank loan. That's going to, like, for some of you, that's going to pop your mind. But it is a lot easier to raise the capital than go through a bank loan. So let's go raise capital.
Awesome. All right. Before we go to the next, any questions? Any questions? Okay.
Well, and before you ask that, Stacy, I'm going to throw it out there because you all are here. I mean, you're here, you've stayed, you've listened. This is a chance, like, hey, Kimberly, what would you suggest? Or Stacy, what would you ladies suggest I do next? And just do a quick, like, 30 seconds, kind of what's your situation? This is it. We're here for you. I take time from my day. It's my husband's birthday to come be here for you because I want you all to do real estate. So I'm only slightly in the doghouse, but it's okay.
Sorry, Gary.
He had to go bottle wine. It's bottling day. My husband's a winemaker. It's kind of cool. So my job is in real estate, and they always think that's fun until they hear my husband's like, oh, well, he's way more interesting. But anyway, tell me about you all. You're here. I want to answer a question for you personally. Please, let's get you going.
Evelyn's got kids, and so she can't undo her thing, but she asked,
okay,
when you state raise capital, do you mean through collaboration with other investors?
Yes, Evelyn, that's a great question. And so raising capital is about, there's a lot of different ways you can structure it. And so I prefer smaller groups of investors, like I was saying, like 3 to 5 people. And you, like, I'll tell you a deal that I was working on here in March, and it was a really cool boutique motel. I might have told it on one of my other stories, but I reached out to a friend. So people will give you money. This is the honest to God truth. They will give you money because they know you, like you, and trust you. That's why they give you money. And I know that because I've seen people give money to other people they should never give money to. But they did it because they knew them, liked them, and trusted them. And so I made a call to a friend who I knew had other friends that were interested in this kind of short-term rentals. And I was looking at a boutique motel that I was underwriting as an apartment building. Cause I always like to have multiple strategies. And then the way opposite end was to turn it into a full-blown kind of boutique, full short-term rental. And it was a phone call to a friend that said, hey, this is kind of what I'm doing. Take a look at my numbers. And he's like, that's cool. I'm like, hey, do you know anyone that might be interested? Because I knew that he had friends that were all kind of in that same world. So just get out there and network, right? Go meet people. And he goes, give me a day. Let me call you back. So 24 hours later, I got a call, and it's like, I got 2 guys. But the first one wants to be the only investor. So he's willing to put up the $2 million to do the project. So it was a phone call. Now, is it always that easy? No. But what makes it that easy, what makes raising capital that easy, is by building relationships. And that's something you all can start right now, is networking within the organization, going out. We can't go to networking groups yet because they're not there, but there's so many relationships I've built just through Facebook, and getting, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? How can I help you? What are you working on? Oh, cool. So, and I always lead when it comes to raising capital, I always lead with, what are you doing and how can I help you accomplish that? Whether or not it has anything to do with my project. It doesn't matter, because that's how you build your database of really cool people, first of all, to do real estate with. So yeah. So I saw some questions come in the chat. Awesome. Good job.
I'll go ahead and read them for you so that you can see.
Okay.
I was going to say Jennifer just saw one.
Nice.
Oh, wow, that went quick. Okay, so I've been fixing, so Evelyn says, I've been fixing my personal credit for the past 8 months and preparing to gain access to business credit at 0%. I'm still contemplating my strategy with either apartment, hold, or mobile homes. Still figuring all this out.
Awesome.
Very good.
Awesome. And the truth is, you don't, if you can just talk to someone and be interested in them and find out, look for people that have overlap with you. One of my clients that I've worked with over the years got into real estate who had absolutely no credit, had a bankruptcy and a foreclosure, or maybe it's just a foreclosure. Anyway, he had no credit, nothing, no money, no credit. And we bought a lot of real estate together by raising private capital, and primarily through investors using their self-directed retirement accounts. Yeah.
Love it. That is awesome.
Cool.
We have another question. Oops, I just jumped down. Emmanuel, watching live on Facebook, says, how much capital should you be looking to raise with a couple of investors?
So that's a great question. It depends upon how many people that you want to have hanging out with for the next 3 to 5 years. Because remember, all these people that you're raising capital from, you're going to be spending time with. So I only raise capital from people I like. It's kind of a pre-qualifying thing because you're going to be stuck together. So if they drive you crazy in the first 5 minutes, then you don't want their money. By all means, love on them and help them in their journey, but don't take their cash. I don't care if they have $10 million, seriously. So looking for capital and looking for deals you're going to do at the same time, and they're going to help each other out. So if you had somebody come to you today that said, hey, I got $500,000, well, that helps you know that you could easily go find a deal up to like 2.5 million. So now you've got focus on your shopping versus, if somebody comes to you with $1 million, you've easily got up to, almost 4 million in purchasing power. So I do both of them simultaneously, and I look for investors who have larger chunks of money because it just makes your job easier. Now, that being said, the first couple of deals that we were involved in, we put them together with 25,000 here and 50,000 there and 70,000 here and did some super small deals just to get our feet wet and going. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing. You can go, find multifamilies for like $200,000 or $300,000. They're not in California, but they are out there, and you can put them together with a small group.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Stace.
Yes.
Can you take the next question? Because I realized I didn't plug in my computer and I need to go grab my power.
Go for it.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, so Freddie asked the question, would you suggest a cash out refi or a HELOC on a personal property to get started? So Freddie, absolutely. Oops, I just changed our view real quick. Absolutely, that is something, that's something that's gonna be personal to each person. So if you're willing to tap into the resources you have, but that is one of the resources. So if you have equity in your home, your personal residence, that amount that you pull out in order to put into a deal is one less outside person in your deal, both from a management standpoint, also from a profit sharing standpoint. So, when we are working with someone and helping them get going in real estate, we really look at what are all the potential resources that you have available to you, whether they're your personal resources or whether it's through business or whether it's through family or friends or how to network. But 100%, if you have the ability to do a cash out refi, now that may or may not be super available right now, but if you do, or to do a HELOC, first of all, I would actually suggest HELOC over cash out refi if it's available, just because when you do a cash out refi, let's say you can't put the money to work right away. Let's say you're looking for a deal, but you just don't have a way to use the money. Now you're paying interest on it. So it's not that it's a huge amount of money, but you are paying interest when maybe the money's not at work yet. With a HELOC, or home equity line of credit, you are only paying money on it when you draw from it. So if you start seeing that people are getting their HELOCs pulled or something like that, which I don't know that we're seeing that, but then I might do a cash out refi and keep it. But in general, I don't want to be paying interest on money until I'm putting it into play. So between the two, if you have the option, HELOC is going to be strategically better for you financially than a cash out refi. But absolutely, you want to use that. You could use the equity you created in your home to literally start to build your business and your real estate portfolio. So 100% on that one. Let's see. Next question is from Emmanuel. He says, most of my friends are low capital at the moment. Do you guys help out with putting together a team of investors or for raising capital? While I would like to work with my friends, you think, I would like to take advantage of the interest rates that are out right now. I'll go ahead and answer that one because that's a great question. Actually, Kimberly and I have done a lot of talking about that, and I know that is something she feels actually really passionate about, is helping people come together. So, from an organization standpoint, we haven't done that before where we specifically put groups of people together, and we will not do that. However, we have multiple times helped to facilitate introductions between people that we know. Like, we know that we have some people that they're like, I don't really want to do all the work, but I have money, so I'd like to put my money to work. And so we will facilitate introductions, but we just won't get involved in the deal. So from helping out put it together, we don't say, oh, let's put Freddie and Steve and Cammie together, and now you guys go do a deal. We don't do that. But I might say, hey, Freddie, go talk to Steve, because I think you guys might have some opportunity for collaboration. So we absolutely do that all the time. And then another question from someone watching live is, what's the difference between syndication versus raising capital?
Great question. So raising capital is the activity. Syndication is the structure. And so what I mean by that is you're, as an investor, most investors out there, you're either doing real estate with your own money, or you're doing real estate with somebody else's money, right? OPM. So that's raising capital if you're using OPM, somebody else's money. Now, how you structure that money is many different ways. And I've been involved in 2 different syndications, and that's where I prefer to do smaller groups of investors these days. It's just less cats to herd and emotions to manage, because it's an emotional process. And so a syndication, you've probably seen them or heard them out there. There's groups that are putting together, there might be 2 general partners, and then there's like 100 limited partners, passive investors putting in 25,000 or 50,000 or 100,000. So that's a syndication. And you're going to have the general partnership, which would be you, and maybe somebody else that brings experience to the table. It's going to run the deal. You'd be the general partners. And then the syndication is the overall entity that all of this participates in. It's registered with the Securities Exchange Commission. There's rules about how you form these and how you can solicit the funds. And there's easily 50 to 100 people in a single syndication. So it's the structure of how to do it. You can also just do a small group and do a joint venture partnership, or do tenants in common, or like the deal I was telling you about that I was looking at in March. We were just going to form an LLC, and we were each going to have a share of the LLC. So something super simple, doesn't cost that much money to go and put together. We were each going to have a responsibility or kind of a role within the organization, and nobody was going to be a full-on passive investor. That's where you have to be really careful. And much cheaper. Syndication is going to set you back. The 2 that we've done, and I've gotten quotes recently, a syndication can run you anywhere from $8,000 to $30,000 to actually put that structure together. So it's not where you're going to start unless you got some big, hairy, audacious goals that we need to talk about, and then we'll talk about it.
Awesome. All right.
So keep it simple. I like simple. Let's get to the money quicker, if that's okay with everyone.
Steve actually wants to come on and ask.
Oh, Steve. Okay, Steve, you're unmuted.
All right. So I'm going to kind of go off of that syndication and
Awesome.
And the other aspects.
Okay.
So you mentioned you like to keep the group small, which I totally agree with that. When does it cross that line to syndication? I mean, I realize you have to know all these people ahead of time and all that, but even in syndication, I'm fading out. Even in syndication, you have to have an established relationship ahead of time. I mean, there's a lot of rules involving syndication. So
Yeah.
how do you know when it's jumping into that syndication realm, or if it's just a bunch of you getting together and buying a property?
Great question. That's a great question. Okay, so I'm gonna give you the tip right now that's gonna keep you out of jail. Okay, it's gonna keep all y'all out of jail, because none of us are gonna go there. Okay, so the trick, no matter what you do, okay, here's the trick, that you're going to establish a relationship with someone first. And that can be through Facebook. Okay, that can be, hey, let's, I see you're doing real estate. What are you doing? What are you involved in? What are you looking for? Let's just have a chat. Let me see if I can help you with anything, right? Here's what I'm doing. I go post on people's comments in other groups all the time, and to generate interest and then take those conversations offline. Well, now that person goes into, so I'm a Google girl. I keep everything in Google, just as simple for me. So however it works for you, there's no right or wrong answer. You don't need a fancy CRM, and I like free. So I put their name in there, and then I put whatever contact information I have on them in there. And then I put the date and kind of how I met them. And so no matter what I'm doing, whenever I'm raising capital, no matter what, anytime I meet anybody, they go in my database. So that way it doesn't matter, because the way the rules work to stay safe is you have to have a pre-existing relationship. So that's going to keep everybody safe, right? So there you go. That keeps you out of jail. Make a little note in your database when you met them. And then it doesn't matter if you're a group of 2 or 5 or 500. You've already, first of all, built your database, because that's where your money really is. And you've protected yourself no matter when you want to start crossing that road into. Basically, the rule of syndication is, are they a participating member of the entity, or do you want them to just give you cash and not tell you anything? That's the fine line right there. And the minute you don't want them to have any job in the company is when you need to make sure you have a pre-existing relationship, and you need to work with your attorney on structuring it correctly.
So that's when you create a, whatever, like you said, an LLC or whatever the group is, you have meetings, and you just have meeting notes and everyone participates. Someone has this task or that task. And as long as they're doing something,
Yep.
then it's not a syndication.
Correct. Yeah. So find them a job. It doesn't have to be a big job, just a little job. Great question. And that's going to keep it, I appreciate you asking that. It's going to keep everybody safe. So anytime I go to a networking event and I get a contact, I do that. Anytime I meet somebody online, it goes in my list. So
you put it on, what do you say you put it on? A Google, you just have a spreadsheet or something? Or
so I put everything into Google Contacts.
Contacts.
Yeah. So that way they're in my phone. So if they hit me up, I've got their number already in there if I've got it, and their information is all in there. And so I just keep it all in contacts. And I do different labels so I can separate them out. So depending upon like property managers or lenders or investors or realtors, or because I'm always trying to connect people, right? I want to bring value no matter what it is. If you're interested in single family home flipping, I'm going to introduce you to some money guys. I'm not interested, but hey, if I can help you out, because the thing about raising capital is it takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight. I wish it does, which is why I want all of you to start now. Like the sooner you start, just talking to people. It didn't have to be a long conversation. Just, hey, what are you doing? Let's get to know each other. And if I can ever help you, I'd love to do it. I've got a database of lenders like a mile long, and property managers a mile long, and commercial realtors a mile long. I'll share those all day.
Hey, Kimberly, since we're on the topic of money, another question came in, and I know other questions came in, but since we're on this topic, I'd like to just do this one and then we can go back. But
okay.
So it says, could I just approach my family, friends, or private money lenders and seek to pay them like X% to store their money for X time period and keep 100% ownership of the property, and maybe pay them out later once I can refi or something? And I believe that they're worried about SEC stuff. Like, is that a possibility? What are the parameters?
So friends and family aren't going to run into a securities exchange issue. You've got pre-existing relationships, so you're good there. Yeah, and there's a million different ways to structure money. So if they're putting in all the money, what we did a lot with smaller deals was, and they just were happy because that's where you start to look at too, how much, what am I going to give them, right? If somebody's giving me cash, what am I going to give them? And this starts to going back to Stacy's section on underwriting. So are you going to give them a percentage of the deal, or do they just want a preferred return, which is basically an interest rate? And that's going to be the cheapest way all day long for you to get their money back to them, is through a preferred return. Because when you start actually carving off shares of the deal, you're potentially giving away more of the deal. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons to both of them. And let's say that they bring in all the money. And so they're just going to be the note on the property. You're just going to make them like the bank. And we did that a bunch of times with self-directed retirement accounts that had $250,000 to $500,000 sitting in them. We just did a note deed of trust. You're muted.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you for that. The follow-up question to that was that, do you have experience with seller financing or creative financing or ways to get in there without a lot of money? And like, can you just talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Seller financing is alive and well. It's not what you're going to lead with, though. You're going to always lead with bank financing. It's going to open the door to have that conversation. So the largest project I've worked on has been 182 doors, and we purchased that with seller financing. And so we put $350,000 down, and the seller carried back the note for 5 years, interest only at 7%. So we got a $1.45 million loan. Didn't have to go to a bank, didn't have to qualify, didn't have to get an appraisal, didn't have to do any of that. And so that was the whole, and it was a significant value add project. And so the whole benefit was to, run that interest only period, to put all of the capital back into the property so that when we, finished it, we could sell it or refinance it.
Cool.
Yeah. And then actually, like another example of seller financing. So a lot of times how seller financing happens is it happens through a conversation. I'll give you a great example. I was walking a property, and when I initially walked up to the property, it was these two people, and never underestimate who you're meeting. You just don't know who you're meeting. And I've learned over the years that usually the person I think is the handyman is the owner. So don't be surprised. And so I walked up, walking this property, and just, asking the guy to tell me, asking him to tell me about the deal, what's going on, and what's happening here. And there were two properties we were looking at, and I figured out and learned, pretty quickly in the conversation that this guy was the owner. Okay, awesome. So then I'm asking questions just to get to know him. Hey, so why are you selling? What's going on? What are you going to do with the money? Are you going to 1031 it? Are you going to take the cash out? And he's like, oh my God, my wife wants to get out of here and move to Florida. Awesome. Okay, cool. How can we help your wife get to Florida? And there were two properties. So then it was a question of, do you need to sell both of them? Or what if we could buy both of them, would that be more helpful? Or if we just buy one of them, which one does your wife really want you to get rid of? Which one does she want to see go? And so he's telling us about it. We're building a friendship. We're building a relationship. And then I was like, have you ever thought about, do you need all the cash right now? Because it sounded like he didn't. It sounded like he just kind of wanted some of it to make the move. I said, so what if we worked out an arrangement where maybe we get you some of the cash now and some of the cash later? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, he's like, how would that work? And I'm like, well, we could maybe structure some sort of seller financing. And he had never heard of it. God bless him. I mean, he was just a nice guy who was retired, and he wasn't a creative investor. He's just the guy you want to buy from is what he was.
Hey, Kimberly, really quick. I'm not sure if everybody here actually understands seller financing. I realized when I asked the question, oh shit, they might not even know what it means. If you don't know what we're talking about, just drop a comment in the chat so we can elaborate, but keep going, Kimberly.
Okay.
They might not
so
know.
He didn't know what it was. And so, so I walked him through kind of the conversation, and he did, he'd only been with us for like a half an hour. And then he trusted his realtor. And he's like, I'm going to have to talk to her about those, Tanius. I gotta talk to Tanius, and I gotta sit down. I gotta think about it. I won't say no, but maybe. So, yeah, you usually create it, is how it works. And it's a beautiful thing, because then you don't have to, your credit doesn't matter. The reason he's going to give you seller financing is because they know you, like you, and trust you. And then you're going to have your attorney draw up the documents. It's basically going to be a promissory note deed of trust. It's a beautiful thing. Gets recorded. You put maybe a little bit money down, and it's lovely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. We have
Sure.
time for two more questions, and then we can and we could kind of wrap up. But the next one was like, how many units should I start with? And then the last part, like 2-part, how much profit per door can I expect on average, so that I can understand or gauge what my monthly income or rents will be.
Great question. So how many units do you start with? That's a really personal question. So let's just set up the call and kind of figure out. So for some of you, your comfort zone is going to be like 5 to 12. Okay, awesome. Let's do 5 to 12. And then for others of you, you're like, you know what, Kimberly, I need to get somewhere fast. And you come with some experience. You come with, in your job, in your career, in your life. Some of you run offices, you run teams, you've got experience with management. It may not be real estate, but it's in management and it's with budgets. And you're like, I think I could do a 40 unit deal. And some of you maybe have construction experience and you're like, no, I want to go buy something and build something. Awesome. So it really depends upon kind of your risk tolerance. And then profit per door, that's a great question. I gauge that more on a cash flow perspective than I do on a value add perspective. So I'm a value add girl. I am like all about building equity fast, because while I enjoy raising capital and it's important to raise capital, and ultimately I don't want anybody in my deals in the long term. So that's not the long-term play. Like, it's a great short-term strategy. I'm totally good with it for like 10 more years. And then I just don't want that. So value add gets me there faster. But from a cash flow perspective, I start looking at being happy if I can get a minimum of $100 a door a month for net cash flow. That's after I've paid everything, I get to put $100 in my pocket. So, and this is where when I talk to most people, cash flow isn't the best place to start, because that's not going to retire you from your job. Because if you go, well, I need to make $10,000 a month and I need to make $100 a door. Oh my God, how am I going to go get that many doors right now? Yes, that's right. And that's when I say, let's go back and do something like Jennifer and Mary Alice. Let's just go get a 5-plex. Let's go fix it up. And then let's go get you $200,000 at the end of that and sell it in a year. And now you got $200,000 of house money to play with.
Boom.
Yeah.
Mic drop. That's my favorite. All right. Last question was from the same gentleman, Emmanuel, who's watching live. And he
awesome,
asked,
Emmanuel.
Yeah. He asked, do we need to sign up for anything to get help or forwarded to other investors who are looking for partners like me? I believe he's talking about the now that I realize what he's asking, I think he's talking about like raising money.
Do we need to sign up for anything to get help or forward it to other investors who are looking for partners like me? So I'm not exactly sure I understand this, Emmanuel, so I apologize if I don't answer this correctly, and we can address it more in, a one-on-one phone call. But you don't need to go buy anything to go raise capital. Like, get an Excel spreadsheet, get a yellow notepad. Some of y'all out there like, don't talk to me about spreadsheets. Go get a yellow notepad and write things down. I mean, God bless you. It's amazing. I've seen some really, really wealthy older people be amazing with yellow notepads. So whatever works. But we got to keep track of them. We got to build that relationship. And, organization is going to make that a little bit easier for that. And it starts with, honestly, just having a conversation with people about what they're looking for and getting comfortable talking about money, which for me was really hard in the beginning. I was very uncomfortable talking to anybody about money because I was raised in the South, and good little girls don't talk about money. That's just rude. So, but now I'm like, well, that's great. You want to do that, but how much cash you got and where is it? When we gotta get to the brass tacks, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get that money freed up. And really it's about helping them accomplish their goal. And I've turned away people because my project doesn't get them where they need to go quick enough. Even though they want to invest with me, it's not a good fit. I'm like, hey, that's okay, but go do this, this, and this, and let's check in later. I'm not going anywhere. I've been doing real estate forever. This is not stopping. So cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool. So Kimberly, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap up shop?
You all are amazing.
I mean, because you guys can unmute and like get down and dirty.
They're hardcore. This is the hardcore group here.
Like they're just like, yeah, I don't have questions. You can't even see my face. I'm taking so many notes.
Okay, I have a question. Marlene here.
Hey, Marlene.
Right on, Marlene.
Since I'm from a bookkeeping accounting background as well, I'm all about the dollar bottom line.
Yeah.
Do you offer service, Kimberly? Do you charge fees, things like that?
Yes, that's how I've stayed gainfully employed for about 14 years. I've been self-employed now. So investors hire me for all sorts of things. I tend to clean up messes is what I tend to do. And sometimes recently investors have been hiring me to help them with their due diligence. I've had investors hire me to teach them how to invest. So, but my niche is helping investors optimize their portfolios. Yeah. But due diligence is fun. It's a fun little project. Yeah.
If you're Marlene, if you're interested in talking with Kimberly, she's one of the top coaches for us for apartments.
Okay.
And if you want to set up a call with us, we can walk through like where the gaps are for you and customize a strategy. We are getting that out. So I just like, does anybody else have any questions? Because I was just going to like try to drop the mic and get you guys going really quick, close it and wrap it up. So for those of you that don't realize, our company name is called Warriors of Wealth.
Yes.
And the reason, it's Warriors of Wealth. And one of our biggest values in our company is that like, we're not on the sidelines. Like we're in the Coliseum. We're in the center. We're not in the stands. We're gladiators. We're warriors. We're in there getting shit done. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody when I'm cussing. Some people say, hey, love it when you cuss, Allie Mac or Ollie. We're warriors. We're in the middle. It's not a spectator sport at all. No spectating, like none. Is that a word? Spectating? I'm gonna make it a word. I'm waiting for Stacey to say felonious. It's not a spectator sport. Like we gotta get involved. And first of all, you guys all came here. We just spent 2.5 hours teaching you some really deep concepts. I am proud of everybody who's still on this screen. I know some people had to leave because, I mean, let's face it, we went an hour over. I don't care. We wanted to give you a brand experience. I want you to do yourself a favor. Like now is the time to get out of the stands, get into the arena, and like, let's go. Have you ever seen 300? Somebody please. Okay, like this is Sparta. Okay, this is Sparta. We're like, bam, let's go. Let's go. I don't care if you're a man, I don't care if you're a woman, I don't give a shit. Let's go. Like it's time. So Kimberly, Natasha, Stacy, and I have seriously set out time to meet with everybody who's interested in taking action. Like right now, you just learned concepts. You just went through and assessed yourself. You did a self-evaluation on areas that you want improvement in. Like, let us know. Text that number. Stacy's going to reach back out to you and schedule a call so that we can assess where are you looking to improve. And then like we will map out a plan with you. Whether you decide to join in to the mastermind, like we don't even care. Just come, let us diagnose you and let us give you some value so that you can get started at least and just go for it, okay? And you might find at the end of the call that you want to get in and figure out like, how can I make it faster? How can I get results quicker? And we have programs for that. So just roll up your sleeves, like text that number. And if you still need it, I'll put it in the chat. It looks like Lulu actually has a question. Lulu, are you still here? Yeah, she's still here. Can you hear me, Lulu? Felonious, let's go. Oh, Lulu.
Yes, I'm here.
There you are. You know what I just saw? I just see your question here. Okay, yeah. What is better, to build or to buy? And what's the difference between an existing apartment and a new construction? Kimberly, you want to take that?
Yeah, those are great questions. It really depends upon your goal and your experience. So I tend to like to get to the cash as quickly as possible with the least amount of risk. So that tends to be buying an existing building instead of figuring out new construction unless you already have that experience. So do you have experience in construction, Lulu?
No.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
but I wondered if takes how long takes to buy an apartment? 4 to 8 months. And then to build and take the same amount of time. And I was wondering if it is possible to build it cheaper and then pre-leasing before finish the construction.
Great questions. Great questions. Unfortunately, right now in this day and age, it is not possible to build it cheaper. And you just hit on like one of my hot buttons, girlfriend, because because there's many issues, and we could talk about it more one-on-one, but because of the trade wars that we've been having, it's actually impacted all of the building materials, and the cost of building materials have gone up significantly in the last 2 years. Cost of labor is tremendously high, which makes building very expensive. And when you build, the only product, and this is part of why we have an issue with affordable housing all over the country, unfortunately, is that the only thing that's been built since the last crash has all been A-class housing. It's all been the really pretty stuff, not the stuff where the workforce housing needs to live, the people who work at the restaurants, the people that, you know, have hourly jobs, the people that are struggling. They don't have anywhere to live because it's too expensive to build and then only rent it for $500, $600 a month. So if you don't have construction experience, it's also a really big risk, because now not only do you need to learn how to operate the building, but you also need to learn how to go through construction and permitting and zoning and contractors, because you're gonna go through a lot of that. And so the quickest, safest way is to start with just a nice little apartment complex. And you really can get into it. Like, first, it's how long is it going to take you to find the one that's perfect for you, which is kind of just a matter of you first figuring out really what you like. And then second of all, finding it at the right time. It's kind of a little bit of magic. Like, the right seller has to be selling at the right time that you're looking there. So you could blink and miss it. And then sometimes it's just like falls in your lap. I've seen both. So realistically, you could, from what I've seen and worked with clients on for the last 3 years, get into a building from zero to closing escrow pretty realistically within 6 months. And that's if you're, you know, taking some diligent effort, you know, every week. Not 40 hours a week, but, you know, a little bit, kind of moving it forward every week.
Oh, and another question I have, this going to be a recording so I can listen again?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to reach out. Since you all registered with your email address, we are going to send you the link to when we upload it to YouTube, so you can come back and watch it over and over again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lulu.
Thanks for being here.
All right. So we also have another question from Ali. He says, where does one source the actual contracts in lieu of realtor involvement? And how do we create legal contracts for seller financing on an apartment deal?
So why do we want to get away from the realtor? Is in the commercial world, the realtors tend to hold most of the keys to the castles. So I don't have any problems with realtors in the commercial world. It can be really different on the single family home world. And I have a lot of very successful friends do a lot of direct buying in the single family world, and they're amazing at it. But doing like a letter campaign in the multifamily world and knocking doors is not how you're going to find deals. Most investors, even, you know, they're going to call a realtor to list it. Now, I'll tell you, okay, here you go, Ali. Where you can find some pretty trick deals is when you find some of the smaller stuff, meaning like 25 units or less, that accidentally got listed with a residential realtor. Boom. And that is always where I find some fun little, we found a deal in Florida like that had, they had no idea what they had, no stinking clue. And there was in a 9-unit building, they were renting at $750 a unit. And it was literally a block from the beach in St. Petersburg. Like the good part of St. Petersburg, not the bad part of St. Petersburg. And it would rent for $1,400. So it was like an immediate upside of almost $800,000 even after renovation. So that was just because a residential realtor had it. So I don't try to source the contracts in lieu of realtors. Plus, I don't mind wholesalers. I don't mind them at all, but I don't like, I like control. I'm kind of a control freak. So
I'm a massive control freak.
So yeah, this is your business and your money and your investors' money. So wholesalers don't necessarily have enough, don't always give you enough information to make a solid decision. And now there's some out there that are really good, and so I would totally work with them, but that would kind of be the other place you come from. And so sometimes they cut your due diligence too short, and I definitely don't enjoy the people out there that are like, I need hard money upfront. All right, well then it's a race to complete the due diligence. I'm not going to go hard on any money until I know that it's a deal that I'm willing to risk the money on. And then how do we create the legal contracts for seller financing an apartment deal? I love my attorneys. I really do. I love my attorneys, and it's not going to be an arm and a leg, and it will protect you. So you can have your attorney draft it up. Now, because it's just the financing document. The contract the realtor's going to draft, assuming you're going to use a realtor, and then your attorney's going to draft up the seller financing document. Now, here's a trick. You could let the seller's attorney draft the document. Let him pay for it. And then your attorney just reviews it. It's a lot cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do it that way too. Unless
Nice.
you really, really want to control it, and then just pay for it up front, because sometimes I feel like doing that.
So sometimes it might be the circumstances that drive that decision, right? I think it's case by
Absolutely.
case for sure. Well,
For sure.
Kimberly, that was awesome. We got to do all these knowledge nuggets with you. Love you. For those of you that are still here, make sure you text the number. I do have a hard close. Stacey's tugging on me. She's got to get on another call where she's doing a live Q&A with our remote wholesale warriors. But yeah. Please, if you haven't already, text it, get a call so that, Kimberly, Natasha, Stacey, or myself can get on with you and devise a plan. Like, get out of stance. Cool? You guys
Awesome.
good? All right. You guys have a good one. And it was a pleasure being here with you today. Thank you so much. Bye.